Good afternoon. Today, I'm going to talk about three articles that deal with the concepts of freedom and liberty from an ancient civilization's perspective, specifically the Romans and the Greeks. The first article that I went ahead and reviewed was Alexander Rosenthal's article regarding freedom in that time period. It's very important to really look at his article, but I also brought into play Jeff Kennedy's article on Cicero and the Roman Republic because both authors use Isaiah Berlin's 1958 article, and they both talk about the differences between freedom and liberty and how that plays a role in what we perceive to be just that. Rosenthal also talks about Hobbes, brings about a little bit more of a contemporary perspective on liberty and Hobbes' interpretation in Leviathan of what is a person's freedom, a person's type of relationship with the government, and how important that is. So the difference between the freedom that the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans differs vastly from the type of freedom that we now, of course, enjoy. There is a major difference. We look at Moira Walsh's article as well, and Ms. Walsh also talks about the relationship, of Aristotle and his philosophy regarding the ancient Greeks' perception of liberty and what liberty does. She mentions that Aristotle stated that you can have liberty despite the fact that you are a slave. However, the reason some people were slaves, or the justification for it, was that the slave owner during that time had the intellectual capacity that a slave did not. So, as a result of that, what ends up happening is the slave master, the owner, is gives his slaves the ability, liberty to move about and not prevent them from, moving around. So that, in its sense, was a sense of liberty. So that becomes a major component here because we starting to see how when we talk about liberty in our contemporary life or in contemporary times, we talk about liberty being freedom of religion, freedom of worship, freedom of speech, and these become tantamount to the American ideals. However, when we go back and we see the relationship between the Romans and the Greeks, their version of it was totally different. A person was free to, we're talking Roman now, Roman during the Republic years, we have people who view freedom as the ability to be able to uh, vote. However, not have the freedoms that we have today. The government will go ahead and still continue to place restrictions upon the citizens. And of course, during the times when a dictator would be voted into office for a short period of time, the people would, may lose some of their civil liberties that they had attained. Now, why is that important? Well, it becomes very important as well because the the Romans worked or lived and had a system where the senators had been designated the carekeepers or custodians of the republic. So any laws that were passed at the behest of the population, the populares, even though the populares themselves were not privy to those decisions or decision making abilities. So the Senate worked strictly as an outside force that would, of course, enact these laws whereby all the citizens would be uh, forced, not necessarily forced, but really had to utilize, or not necessarily utilize, but live and respect the laws that had been passed by the Senate. So liberty between the Greeks and the Romans varies differently as opposed to what we have today. Like I said, Moira Walsh brings about, Aristotle's, Kinamachian ethics and talks about how that differs from the Roman republics. And Rosenthal himself, brings about uh, this concept of duality, that the positive liberty and the negative liberty, and in his article, and it becomes very important because what ends up happening is you see two different authors, Jeff Kennedy and Rosenthal, really articulating what Berlin has explained and really established in his version of what is liberty and how it all comes together. So these three pieces really kind of give us some background of the style and the manner of liberty, of the lifestyle of citizens in these ancient civilizations. Thank you so much.